just welcome everybody.
You can't sit there. I gotta move.
Ahoy Rum Explorers, I'm Nia, and it's officially Men's Mental Health Week. I'm super excited to welcome Andrew Cabot from Privateer and Charles Gunther, my fellow rum enthusiast. Welcome, guys.
Nice to be here.
Thank you for having me back.
Absolutely. We had such a blast last time, Charles, so I figured. So we obviously know that this is such an underrated topic, but definitely wanted to get a variety of not only rum friends, but rum experts. So we're going to go through questionnaires that we had previously discussed. So Andrew, how do social expectations and traditional gender roles impact men's willingness to seek help for mental health issues?
Yeah, let's start off easy. Good one.
Well,
Thanks for the underhand. No, I mean, it's such a big topic. There's nothing, I can only talk about my own personal experience and what I've witnessed and so forth. But, to your point, our world has sped up so much, and there's so much influence, and there's so many ways to knock through into your life. And I think it's while I can't say much about the specific topic other than what I do know, I would say what we do know is that more and more people are being overwhelmed by just the challenges that the modern world presents. We're not evolving as fast as technology. We're not evolving as fast as a lot of things. And we're not meant to evolve that fast. So you see a lot of people that are caught out, men in particular. And I think the topic is traditional gender roles. And I think men just have very different ways of coping. But that's sort of a highlight from my beginning.
That's amazing. That's a great perspective. Charles, do you have any input on that one?
Yeah, well, I think it's changing a lot now. So I'm 40, so I'm early 40s. My wife's not here, so I don't know exactly 42 or 43. So I'll keep up with that. But when I was younger, like my role model, my father, it was, you don't really show emotions very much. And, I think that generation was less likely to speak openly about emotions or issues that they were having. And that kind of colored my path initially until I was able to, speak with the therapist and speak with more people more openly about it. And I think in the last maybe 5 years or so, it's been more accepted for men to have to speak about the issues that they're having. You have some professional athletes that are talking about their struggles that they have with it. And when you see people that are role models or, more famous and more of a limelight speak openly about it, I think it kind of makes it easier for somebody like me or anybody else to feel free to speak about it as well.
I love that. I really do. I think it's so important to have people from different backgrounds, especially Andrew. A lot of people, especially us rum aficionados, know about you and your company. So I really wanted to touch on the first question because you obviously have such a tremendous legacy in the company. Can you tell us if you felt a little bit of pressure because of the name and the legacy that the company and the name carry?
I think the answer is, of course, you feel pressures from whatever it is that you respect and look up to. And most things that we respect and look up to aren't perfect. So, there's a lot to make sense of. And ultimately, the goal is to make it yours in a productive way. And so I think what I had to do was I was inspired by an honest story. I had to never confuse it with my own. So I was really just a kind of a vehicle for putting it forward. The values in some degree show up in the company and the products. I think we're very careful about what we make and being honest to the customer and all the rest, which is not common for rum. But by the same token, I would say it was really a referendum on my own beliefs. I mean, talk about men's mental health. It's insane to start a rum company, right? You're dealing with some of the most difficult challenges in the world. I was
Yeah.
lucky to have, some success in technology and could move into this. But it's an endless series of unfair fights, is the best way to describe it. And I think it's probably made me a much better person. What I wanted to achieve was never going to be achieved without a lot more strength. And I think that's been, for me, the gift of the sort of quote unfair aspects of the markets and the world I play in. I can't make sure I say this because it's only right. I was certainly born with privilege and had a lot of good things in my life. I'm no way dismissing that. I'm just only describing the challenges of what I've had to face where everything is jug handled to somebody else's advantage. And particularly these last 10 years, there's been, let's say in some ways appropriately, in some ways not appropriately, there's been some big shifts, perhaps an over rotation, perhaps a relaxing a little bit, but we've had a lot of social evolution in this, since the late 90s. And it's interesting to see people, quote unquote, love you and hate you for different reasons that are kind of just you.
Yeah.
Nothing you said, nothing. You've made a good effort to be a good citizen, but people have strong feelings, strong beliefs, bad experiences, bad associations, and there's a lot of long, slow conversations to get through those.
I feel that also social media has played such an impactful part in that sense of feeling that love and hate relationship. At times it feels like social media should be more like anti-social because it lets people not connect more, but kind of disengage a little bit more, is my perspective.
It's the champion of false dichotomies. Choose this or that.
Exactly.
And then
Exactly.
the right answer. It's absurd.
Plus, it gives people the power to say whatever they want to say because it's kind of hidden behind a wall that you can't be technically seen. Yep. So, okay, well, let's go on to the next question. So the next one is, what are some effective strategies for men to manage stress, anxiety, or depression in their daily lives, and how can these be more widely implemented? Obviously, this is going to be based on your experience. Andrew or Charles?
Charles, I had the last go. This is your turn.
Okay, so yeah, this one was actually tricky for me.
For stress, yeah.
I didn't have any way to do that for a long time. I had issues with depression and anxiety for probably most of my 20s, and didn't really have any tools or outlets to know how to deal with that. I was not educated, how to deal with these things, and I didn't have any outlet. But through working with my therapist, it's going to be different for each person, obviously, what the outlet is. If it's a hobby, if it's exercise, if it's somewhere to focus your thoughts that are not kind of spiraling, thinking about why you're anxious, why you're depressed, something to kind of clear your head and allow you to maybe come back to what's stressing you out with a different perspective than if you're just sitting in it, continuously all day, all week, all month, whatever. So I think separation a little bit from the stress, even if it's, yoga for 20 minutes, whatever the case may be, just some way to clear your mind, is what works best for me. For me, it's yard work, or, sometimes it's just something rote and repetitive, like washing dishes, where I can kind of just zone out and I'm just washing dishes for, 30 minutes or whatever. And then I come back.
Yeah, kind of like a meditation, right? Like a meditation, focus on just one thing.
Yeah. And for me, that seems to work the best.
No, but it's smart. You're breaking the cycles. And again, the brain does it's always going to find a problem. It's always going to associate a feeling. It's always going to cause, forgive me, but trouble. And you're right, stepping back and clearing the mind and getting yourself into a different groove is almost always the good answer. Alcohol and drugs, sometimes is what some people choose, but I love your examples. Mow the lawn, do some yard work, I'm building a bookcase right behind me.
Right.
Nice.
So it's again, that was something we learned in grad school about how brain is just always eating. It's a Pac-Man. And if you don't, help it find the right path, it's going to keep bumping into things. And again, once you've had an emotional association, your brain will actually look for other things that make you feel that way. And it'll cycle stress on you, which is brutal. Now, that's an education perspective. That's not a psychological perspective, but it's a pretty good way to look at it. So I loved your response.
Thank you.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
it took me a many years to find out that drugs or alcohol or just stewing in it was not the is not the answer, and it might be a temporary relief, but it's you're coming right back to the same problem but worse.
No, it's true. And wine tastes better when you're relaxed.
Yeah.
Rum tastes better when you're relaxed.
Rum tastes better.
So, Andrew, do you have any techniques you use besides building a bookcase? Because I do like that one, getting hands-on with nitty-gritty stuff.
No, I think there's a terrible analogy in this, and we're kind of touching on some things that are hard. Some people that are less social, right? They have less outlet, to less connection, less things. They have to be more thoughtful about how they do this. And sometimes people that are more social have their own set of challenges. I think the thing that I think about when something starts to annoy me, I know I'm cycling. I know I'm speeding up in some way in my mind, because it means I've lost my perspective. I can't see the whole picture. I'm focusing intently on one piece of it, which is back to when we made our joke about social media. But if you keep looking at one perspective and thinking you have to choose between that or the alternative, you've lost all focus, right? And when you can kind of get high in the tree and look down and sort of see it all and be like, all right, wait, okay. Those feelings are actually my signal that it's time to stop. It's not keep pressing, keep pushing. It's the opposite. And it's, I think that's a skill. It's almost like when you're a kid, you learn when you're tired and you go to bed. As an adult, you have to kind of watch this. And again, I'm what's unfair in my reply and what I do is, listen, some people have to put up with an awful lot. So I don't want to confuse that with people that are just going through the normal 9 to 5s, kids, grandkids. I now have grandkids, kind of cool. You worry about 5 million things, but as soon as you lose perspective, you're no longer in the room for them or your employees or whatever it is. And I think it's a great lesson for me personally. And as soon as I feel that pressure, I know I'm in the wrong place and I want to start backing it out.
I love that. That's so simple, but it's definitely a very effective tool. So I really enjoyed that. I'm going to go a little bit into the comments because people are loving the conversations, by the way. There's a cheers. Hello, everybody. Someone gave a little perspective that said, it takes 4 seasons to adjust to something new. I heard the years going, that rings true for this person who's Marshall with spirits. He also reviews rum, whiskey, and other spirits. Everybody's saying hello, cheers, really enjoying the conversation. Marshall also said, I find men's mental health to be an interesting issue. As someone who struggles to stay calm and level-headed, I find it a constant balancing act to stay healthy without abusing alcohol.
Yep.
And I love that you brought that up, Marshall, because especially as we have access to so many incredible spirits, it's an easy go-to for us, right? So it's really important for us to manage the mental health aspect and not succumb to like these, I would say, not necessarily like bad tools to adjust and be able to overcome the stress or whatever you're feeling in a bad mental state.
Right.
And make it a fair fight. I agree with that. But I love that thought. It does take time. It's a practice, right? And again, it doesn't matter if it's yoga or when you start reading a lot in graduate school, for instance, you can't believe that you're going to read 1,000 pages a week or something. And then your brain just, call it plasticity, call it neurons and dendrites, call it whatever you wish. You just, it's a muscle, and you become something that you didn't think you could become when you first faced the problem.
And you actually, I feel like it's such a difficult thing to accomplish is just consistency, and a lot of these things require consistency. So setting like habits, daily habits of doing
Yep.
these things,
Yep.
so that when you feel like you're struggling, you know immediately how to plug into those positive reinforcements because you're constantly doing it. So
And that was Charles's answer.
Very-
at the beginning. Just dial into something that makes you happy or gets you away from it or whatever it is and feels good and productive, and yeah, give your whole nervous system a break.
Yeah,
I love
I work with so I have just these books everywhere that are just, you know, blank field books, but then I write down a list of this is all the stuff that I have to do, and then I have to make sure that I'm squeezing in time every day to be able to detach and declutter my brain a little bit. But I have to put it, you know, I work really good on a list, so I have to make sure that I have that time set aside every day to decompress a little bit.
Smart.
Marshall from Earth Spirits is also saying that he uses the rule of if he feels frustrated, don't drink. If you feel overwhelmed, don't drink. Only drink when life feels calm. I love that, Marshall.
No, and it tastes better. I mean, it should be joyful. It shouldn't be numbing.
It's not medicine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well said.
Sean also said, this is needed for more often for sure. I've dealt with a lot of over the last year and was able to overcome a lot of different methods, exercising, self-improvement, confiding in family and good friends, which is so important. And I am going to talk about that as well later on. But thank you, everybody. Let's move on to the next question. How can we address the stigma surrounding men's mental health and promote a culture of vulnerability and openness among men?
Well, that's an easy one, Charles. Why don't you just take that? Give me.
Yeah, well, I think kind of what we're doing right now. I think just being open and speaking openly about it, and you know, the more you talk freely with, you know, with your friends, with your family, and this kind of thing makes them feel more willing to be open and honest about those kind of issues that they might be having as well. So it's just you know, repetition, right? It's just continuing the behavior. If you don't present it as having a stigma and you're willing to openly talk about it, it'll help everybody feel more welcome to speak about it, I think.
I agree.
I really enjoy that. How about you, Andrew?
So what do I think about? I think about young men a lot just because of, you know, as I said, sons and grandkids coming and so forth. We're living in an interesting time where there's a very positive feminist movement. And I think that's kind of shut down some of this conversation. And there's 1,000, you know, oversimplified thoughts about men and how they communicate, and when they're quiet is when they're talking, and all these different things. And none of them are perfect, but you get the concepts. And I think there's a balance point. We need people. We're learning, right? We're learning how to live life. And I think one of the mistakes we often make is we think at whatever age you decide you make it, maybe you're making money, maybe you got married, maybe you've had a kid, but we suddenly decide that we're no longer learning. And then, you know, everything goes kind of south then. And I like the people that kind of wake up modestly. They see a little bit more, they can laugh a little bit more. And I think for men, you know, bro culture, I think about all these different things that are going on. They've been around forever. There's nothing new there. But I think those are all escapes. You know, it's kind of I'm going to find a camaraderie that is non-benevolent. And I think we probably, you know, I think about, I mean, it doesn't matter if it's mafioso culture, it doesn't matter what it is. The right culture, when I think about my lifelong friends, is the other people around me that I trust implicitly with everything that I am and own, who will work as hard as I am, will hold the shield next to you, will, you know, make mistakes and come back to you without a blink, at least the next day, and own it, right? And I think that's, you know, kind of men have to solve this for themselves. You know, we can't, we're not going to gather into a cause. We're not going to do all these things. we really just need to reach out and make our connections and hold them tightly and make sure they're productive ones. So I think it's easy to slip into a world that is a wolf pack, but isn't necessarily accomplishing anything great. And that has a way of becoming rudderless.
Yeah, I think so.
I love that you touched on that. I think it's so important because I feel like as human beings, we have that want to belong to something or belong with a group and feel comfortable. And what I highly encourage my male friends and even my dad is very old school. I try to encourage conversations with him that sometimes might seem a little bit uncomfortable, but the more you have them, I feel like it's like working out the kinks. Your friends will start to realize that you're really encouraging them to open up and
Yep.
tell you how you feel, and I love that.
Yeah. Oh, one thing also that I wanted to, it's more of a longer term process of helping to address this, but with my son who is 12 now, like we speak openly and honestly about our emotions and our feelings, and we'll talk through issues with him because I want him to know, that it's okay to have emotions. Everybody has them, and if you talk them out and explain what you're feeling, it'll help the person that either you have an issue with or just your partner or your friend, whatever the case may be, to understand how you're feeling and to be able to relate better to you. So it's really important for me that he knows and understands that, it's okay to have these feelings and to speak about them openly. That's, I think a lot of that comes with parenting. If we try to do this, then, long term, it will help at least him and hopefully his friends as well.
No, I love that. And again,
Plus, I feel.
Go ahead, please.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I love that, and I think it's what maybe it feels like an indulgence, but to become of one mind about something. Let's say your son's got a question. He's whatever it was. It doesn't matter. The situation doesn't matter. It's the next step. What matters is that you kind of understand the situation and you're clear about it. Then you can act. Acting is not that hard once one's clear, right? So the way you encourage the talking to get to where are you with this is I think is very powerful. That's very loyal.
Working on it, trying to.
Wait till they track the car.
Yeah.
Wait, and how old is he again? Because I can only imagine through teenage years.
Yeah, he's
They're
12.
coming up, right?
Yeah, he's 12, so he's in 6th grade, so he's rolling right into puberty now. So it's going to be a very exciting time in our lives.
Yeah, definitely very interesting. But I love that you're already encouraging these conversations, because not only is it going to allow him to talk about it, but I think he's going to be able to lean on you to know how to process all these emotions, especially like as you're going through your hormonal changes. You have so many emotions that you sometimes feel like you're not yourself, and I'm so excited. I'm so excited for what's going to happen.
You're modeling, he'll expect that of the next person. There's a terrible, I'm not sure it's true, but the expression is, how your sons treat their sister is kind of what they'll look for in their relationships in life. I'm not saying it's true. I'm not saying it's just one of those dumb expressions. But I think if you can talk to your father and your father can talk to you, it's going to change the trajectory in terms of who you find, who you're close to, what you expect. It's really powerful.
I love it. So let's go back in the chat because there's a lot of comments here.
I'm not sharing my dinner.
So Sean said that this is needed more often for sure. He said that he recommends not keeping things closed off, that's been a huge part for him. We have Respirits also saying that he recently learned that a lot more guys than I knew felt like they were treading on water, that every day is a struggle, and even though you are moving forward, it feels like you're getting out of the water. That's great. So Marshall's also encouraging conversations, which I think is so important. Paul from Drums and Rums is saying the grind is real. A big reason for me taking a break last year on the podcasts. And I get it, especially as creators. A lot of us do all this beautiful thing that you see in the background is just a one person band, and it's a lot of work. And we all, at least most of us that I know in my community of rum enthusiasts, we all do this by ourselves, and we have a full-time job. So sometimes we have to take a step back and just focus on our mental health. Let's see. Jason, the River Pirate 13, said that it was one thing I made sure I was to keep an open line of communication with his son so he could come with him about everything. And he said that he wanted to change things because it wasn't like that with his dad. I love that, breaking those bad cycles, right, of father-son or father-daughter relationships.
Behavior is almost like genes. I agree. It's a great point.
Yeah.
I had a funny story, which is kind of, I haven't shared with anybody publicly, but I grew up pretty dyslexic in the 70s and 60s. So it was one of those things where it was made worse by the fact that people could sort of test me to see that I'm smart, and they interpreted everything in the most negative way, that I wasn't performing, right? So you get one of those things.
Yeah.
And you don't really think about these things. They kind of, it's just your reality. It's not so I had this sort of amazing experience with my son, and in the vein of what Charles was saying, where I was doing this program. It was kind of I'd been in work for 15 years or so. And I kind of got put back into this scenario where the quote unquote, it was a role play in graduate school. And the professor, who, big guy, my size, right? 6'2", 6'3", kind of was coming after me. And he kept saying, well, let's let these kids fail. Let's let these kids fail. Let's let why are we caring? We got 80% of these kids are going to come out here with a great degree. The 20%, that's not our problem, right?
That's horrible.
So this is what
I'm sorry for that experience. That's terrible.
In the modern parlance, I was triggered. And all of a sudden, like a minute later, he puts his hands up and he says, we have to stop the role play. I'm so afraid. I'm so afraid. And I looked at the video. I can't see anything, but he just had his hands up and he just said, we have to stop. He left the room. And where the story goes is, I sat with the professor. We were, she said, what's going on? I said, obviously I must be bumping into something that he can see, but I'm not saying anything. But it's in you deeply, right? It's primal.
Yeah.
And I went home that night. This is the part which is tying me back to Charles. And I sat down. I went down to my kid's bed. My kid I can't explain my kid. He's one of the most interesting, smart, funny kids I know, right? He's got he's got one of those bonnets on, the night before Christmas. God knows how he got it. I don't even remember these things. But anyway, I walk in, I go, am I kind of a jerk about school? And he goes, yeah, you definitely are. he was like fourth grade or something. And he was like, he goes, you're a total jerk. I go, I'm so sorry. I didn't even know this. This is my junk. This is totally my shit. I didn't say that word, but you get the idea. And I'm like, this is me. I bumped into it and I didn't know it, but that was sort of this interesting unraveling of one thing that you can learn from becomes a thing that puts your kid on a different path. Now he's got a kid now. He's got his first child now. But it's funny, we laugh about all these moments where all of our conversations changed from that day, right? No, nobody was there to coach us, and there was no handbook, and there was nothing. It was just a matter of being like, wow, I got to own this and listen and talk and get the feedback from you. And, I'm very grateful for that moment. And of course, it was diffusing for me too.
Right.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for being so vulnerable. I love that you opened up and told us that story. I actually was dyslexic as well. And I have a feeling it came back recently because I am having a little bit of issues. But so I understand. And that's why I love the fact that now there's so many tools.
No, it's amazing.
To where when kids get diagnosed with these things, it's not that they didn't exist back in the day. It's just therapists didn't have the tools to diagnose these different things that people were struggling in order to, it didn't mean they were dumb people. They were just struggling with different things that they could easily overcome with tools and therapy. So it's very interesting to hear your perspective, and I'm sure nowadays it's a lot better.
No, it was amazing. It was a wonderful experience in some. But there's something in there that, there's an awareness piece, right? If you go back to your own experience with this, and I don't want to ask you how old you are, but I'm presuming 80s, 90s is kind of when you were going through school. Is that about right?
Yeah, pretty much.
So, the world was moving towards it, but they were at that time, they were wrangling with, is this fair or unfair that one kid gets more time? Or is this, and then medication was kind of a big piece of it. And there was all these different,
Exactly.
but all of that, back to the earlier part of the conversation, both of you mentioned is, those are chemical adjustments. That doesn't deal with any of the underlying, that doesn't deal with the real stuff. It does give you a little more traction. I think is the best part of it. And so I like how you describe that period, because I think it doesn't necessarily leave you even in a better place than somebody when everybody was just completely unaware, right? They didn't really have all the right answers yet. And now
Exactly. They were still testing the waters.
and they were doing it reluctantly, and there was different minds, like back to, old school, right? And then now I got a kid who's 15 and, really smart, good kid. So I got 4 across the range now. And, he's definitely, he was blacked out in school during COVID. Everybody knows that situation. And
Very hard. That was another adjustment for this generation too. That was
really hard. And if you're not a linear thinker, it was really hard, because there was no way you were going to sit in your house and not lose your focus. But it's funny, he's going to a great school next year, and he's very lucky. He goes to good schools, but 30% of their students are actively involved in differentiated learning programs, right? And to them, they've normalized it. Like, and I think the one thing I've always believed and I've seen more often than not is you do develop out of some of these things. Not all of them. You're going to carry some traits, but the life gets simpler and simpler as you develop. Your chemistry changes. You grow older. You learn habits, whatever you want to call it. And there's more than that list. I don't mean to make it so simple. And it's funny. I'm so happy that he's going to a world where there's literally a cathedral on campus for learning styles. It's the cool place to be. And then there's mutual respect for each other and how you learn, and conversation around it, and people small group and large group, and they get through it. And then they come out the other side, adjusted for what's different about them. And that makes us all better with differentiation.
absolutely. I love the aspect that they tailor to each and everyone's way of learning. And that way nobody feels like a lesser human being, which is the saddest part about before these times.
And all the kids get that feeling of moving the ball up the field, right? It feels good. We all know when we move the ball, right? In whatever form analogy you wish. And then they you can see it in their face. As soon as they're tracking, then they're ready for the next challenge. They're moving, what Carol Dweck would say, they're moving towards the learning mindset.
That's awesome.
I
wish they had that in the 80s and 90s.
Oh my God.
I know, right?
I used to get kicked under the desk.
My life could have been significantly easier, I think, at least the early part of it.
I'm with you, man.
Or everything was detention.
Yeah.
What privateer are you drinking, Nia?
So today I have two. I have a special cask selection from Primos. Where actually Andrew and I met for the first time.
Yep.
A little backstory. I was never a fan of spiced rum, but when Andrew and I met, I discovered that rums can be naturally spiced depending on the cask. And I loved his passion for rum when we met, because I was so surprised. I was like, I don't even like spiced rums, but I love this. This is amazing. He's like, yeah. He was so excited to hear my feedback, and it was very genuine. And they absolutely, at my household, we buy as much as we can find down here in Florida, which we're very lucky. But I really enjoyed your rum. So this one is Rum the Jewels from Primos. It's a used rum cask for 4 years, and then before I was drinking the single rum cask, the letter. Okay, you're gonna have to correct me potentially. Is the letter of Marquis or letter
This
of
one.
Mark?
You could do whichever one. Usually it's letter of mark. I mean, Americans, as you know,
Okay.
whenever you hear somebody say Versailles, you know they're really not going to yield on the French accent.
Okay. And this one is the Killjoy's Last Cup, which is selected by Baytown Wine and Spirits. I actually got this from Massachusetts, which I still need to come up. But our friends picked this up for us. It's a used Calvados cask, 4 years and 11 months.
No, that's nice. They're both excellent. And I was going to say, Bottled and Bond is down there now. We're distributed through 21. We have a barrel heading down to the Florida Rum Society pretty soon. I mean, Florida's just a great state for rum, and we've been very lucky.
Yes,
That's
not
awesome.
Virginia.
Huh?
I'm in Virginia. We're not a great
Yeah,
state for
Charleston,
rum.
Virginia.
Well, Virginia makes things a little bit hard to kind of get into the state and distribute in the state. So
Yeah.
that's our wrestle. We have a couple barrels to go there, but they usually go to private groups, and sort of that's our play there. But we'll change that. I mean, right now, not to switch topics, but right now in the industry, there's a tremendous amount of let's just say stress in distribution. And you can think about the bourbon bubble, and I'll wrap this up in a second.
Yeah.
And they're still sitting on high interest inventory, and it's made everybody very short armed. But I think it'll all come through.
Yeah, that's very interesting that you bring that up because I've been, I don't know if you've heard, but we have the Florida Distillers Trail here in Florida, and I'm trying to hit every single
Good.
distillery that produces rum, just so I'm a well-rounded, unofficial Florida rum ambassador, as I call myself sometimes.
No, I love that.
Everybody that I've been talking to, as you know, these are very small companies. They're family-owned, which I absolutely love supporting. But pretty much 90% of the people that I've interacted with are having major issues with distribution. And to me, it's so astounding that in a country that's so big, and with a spirit that's so popular, there's so many issues.
Yeah. No, it's there's a lot of reasons. It's for another topic. That's going to be the source of my mental health issues right now.
Okay, let me not stress you out, Andrew. Let's switch it up.
Wait,
My last question. Yeah, I don't want to be the source of your stress tonight, for sure.
It's all good. All good. I feel good about where we are.
Awesome, good. We're going to move on. But thank you for your perspective and bringing that up, because that's definitely something that we hear a lot from smaller brands. But moving on to the last question is, how do you guys think that partners can support men in opening up a little bit more about mental health? Or how can we support you in having that mindset to where you open up and you're vulnerable?
So you can have this one, Andrew.
Oh, that was so nice of you. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Let me hold the door for you. Partners are everything, right? And let's just say we're going to go with gender stereotypes. When men feel stressed, they talk less. And that's the better of their options, forgive me, or one of the better of the options. And, a good partner knows you. So if you're being quiet, it means you're processing something. It doesn't mean it's unhealthy. It just means, and a good partner is there. I'm very, very lucky. I married a wonderful woman. And
congratulations, by the way, you recently married, right?
No, I did. She's amazing. She's just beautiful, wonderful woman. Very thoughtful, very empathetic, and I would say, and she's a power career woman, so she gets work, right? She understands the stress of work and those pressures, and I think it's an essential part of success. If you have a bad partner, you almost have to start fixing that. You have to kind of clear your deck, which is a terrible thing to say, but I don't think.
But no, that makes sense. That makes sense. You should be, I always tell people, it's like you shouldn't find somebody that you're trying to make yourself whole. You should find somebody that together you excel.
Well, I think that's right. And I think, the wrong person can be a bad habit. Forgive me.
Absolutely.
Not always. And I'm oversimplifying. I'm sure I'll get a hate mail for that one. But I think But the real issue is don't escape to the next person. The real escape is go back to yourself and figure out who you want to be, what you want your life to be, what it represents. And the weirdest thing about life is like, I got a 12-year-old too, and she's convinced her life is flying by. Of course, you want to give her the perspective that life has barely started. And I think
Of course.
once we get to a certain age, we're less willing to make changes because of other people's opinions or because of the cost or whatever these things are. The stress and trauma, it's very painful. But boy, when you weigh it against what happens if you don't, it's really incalculably better. You got to give yourself a fair chance. So a bad partner to me is, and it's not that hard to see it. If you're having unhealthy reactions to them, if you're off balance, if all these things you see, it goes back to we were talking about mowing the lawn and gardening, right, Charles? I mean, you you feel it, be like, all right, that's real, and whatever I want to think about it, that's just not true, and I gotta go garden. I gotta step back. And I got to ask myself why. And it's the same thing with best friends or sometimes parents and the family. You really have to get to a healthy people, and you have to own what part of the unhealthy you bring.
Yeah,
Absolutely. I love that you brought it back to a lot of these conversations that we're having. I feel like it's also listening to yourself and listening to your gut instinct, because you'll know what's right and what's wrong. But I feel like with the change of times, you've kind of been told to like not listen to yourself sometimes.
Right,
so I think it's for us so important to go back to those roots and like, if this feels weird or this feels off, let's address it. Why am I feeling that way? Why is this feeling off? If I feel completely drained when I'm interacting with somebody, why are they having this impact on me, and why should I continue to interact with this person?
And if there's no willingness to work with you, right? I mean, if you bring this to the table and all you get is, let's say a narcissistic reaction. They're right, you're wrong. This is you, blah, blah, blah. You have to ask yourself the honest question, is it? But if you can, find the space to answer that question, then you know what to do.
How about you, Charles? How can your partner, or how do you think partners can have a more supportive view or more supportive ways?
Well, I think I have to give her the tools to be supportive. If I just shut down and don't communicate. So for me, the biggest thing is just open communication, and just, when you, and with my therapist had suggested it, and we started enacting it, and it's helped tremendously strengthen our relationship, but help us not have like simple misunderstandings blow up into like we're mad at each other for most of a day, So it's just like, hey, when you say this, it causes me to feel this way. And I don't think that's how you intended me to take it, but I'm telling you the way that I heard it. And then that allows her to be able to, clarify if she really meant to hurt my feelings. Sometimes the case, that's fine. But more often than not, it was just, and with her being English as second language, it's very easy for her to mix up how she's saying something sometimes. So it's open communication, I think, is the number one tool for supporting your partner and allowing your partner to be supportive of you in all facets, not just like mental health, but anything. It strengthens you and your relationship, I think, tremendously.
Yep. No, well said.
I really like that you touched on communication. Also, I think it's helpful to realize that yes, we might be human beings, but we all communicate so differently. And it's finding that way to find a like mid-ground to where we can both understand each other and move forward. So acknowledging the fact that like everybody communicates differently, and when you say or when you feel or how you act might be different, and not to take that personal, but kind of like embrace everybody's differences and figure out how to communicate and move forward with it, I think is also important.
Yeah, for me, that's the most important tool is and it's, you know, it's why we're also working with our son to feel comfortable to do that. So we'll speak openly about most stuff in front of him, you know, just so he understands that it's not just he has to be open, like we're open with each other, and you know, as a whole family unit, we feel okay to express how we're feeling, how we interpret something, to make sure that we're getting the message across that we intend.
Yeah, I think that's important too, because you lead by example, right?
Trying to lead with good examples. So
So going back to the chat, Marshall from Rope Spirits is saying that's the hard part about being a dad, managing your emotions and allowing them to feel confident. I really like that. He's also saying that when he graduated in 2011, there was a lot of effort being made to put on special needs and challenged kids. He's like, COVID really screwed that up. He said he lives in Texas, so he really saw it really, really bad in Texas.
Yeah.
That's an interesting perspective.
Yeah, COVID was really tough on my son because he was just starting elementary school, I think. So like missing out on kind of that social.
So it's two big changes.
Yeah, and the social interaction and learning that they lost, I think, is in some ways worse than, you know, the education itself. But I think knowing how to act and interact with other kids your age is, you know, they a lot of them missed like some very important formative time in their life, I think.
Yep.
Absolutely. That definitely had an impact. That's why I keep on hearing parents say like, oh, he's a COVID baby, or just like there's certain things that they're still learning, special social cues or scenarios that they weren't able to be exposed to because of COVID was a big impact on these kids.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate you being vulnerable. Andrew, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Can I ask you one quick question before we dust off?
Absolutely.
What made you ask these questions? What brought this together?
So as I mentioned earlier, a lot of my viewers will see a change in the background. We actually recently moved temporarily into my parents, so I've had a lot more direct interactions with my dad. And I have been doing a lot of trainings at work for mental health. I've gone through suicide awareness training. I joined DEI, so diversity and inclusion, in my job, the committee. So it really exposed me to a lot of things. And then they brought up men's mental health. And I think it's such an underrated, and not a lot of people talk about it. And I've noticed that talking to my dad about different topics and trying to get him to open up has been a struggle. And I was like, wow, if my dad would have grown up or would see, I don't know, people in the community that he's in talk more about these things, I feel like he would be a little bit more open to talking about it.
I agree with that.
Plus 100% of my audience on my channel is male. So thank you so much, man, for tuning in, because I know 100% of you are male. So I figured it'd be so great to bring you on as obviously one of my favorite rum brands and distillers to give your insight to this such underrated topic.
Oh, that was amazing. Thank you so much for having me. Charles, it was really a pleasure to meet you too.
It was great to meet you. Thank you.
Yeah, that was great.
By the way, everybody, if you need any resources, they're down in the description. There's hotlines, there's support groups, anything you need, please check the description. And as always, I'm your fellow rum friend. Reach out to me or Charles. We're here to support you in any way that we can. Thank you so much for everybody tuning in. I really appreciate it. And we'll see you on Wednesday for another video. Have a great evening.
Good night, everybody.
Bye.